this is it, guys. It's the end of an era and the start of 20-hour marathons across the world. The Hobbit, The Battle of the Five Armies is directed by Peter Jackson, co-written by him, Fran Walsh, Philippa Boyens, Guillermo del Toro, the usual crew, stars pretty much everyone from the first two movies with the addition of Billy Connolly as Dane. And in The Hobbit, The Battle of the Five Armies, Thorin and his dwarves have finally retaken Erebor, but the elves and the humans from Lake Town want their share of the treasure, but Thorin does not want to share anything, so they all begin to prep for war. But in the background, the armies from Dol Guldur are slowly marching towards Erebor, and chaos is going to ensue. Now, no matter what you think of the Hobbit films, you have to admit it's still kind of sad that this is probably the last Middle-earth movie we're ever going to get, ever. Like, at least on screen like this. People keep saying that Peter Jackson might do the Silmarillion. I don't think that's ever going to happen because it's not a novel per se, and no one's gonna remake Lord of the Rings. You can't do that. However, I do think this movie is extremely entertaining. I had a lot of fun with it. It has some of the best fighting, in my opinion, from the entire Middle-earth saga. It has great acting. It's just that it has a lot of problems, really, that bring it down, and I really can't call it necessarily a good movie, objectively speaking. But let's talk about the positives first. First of all, in terms of visuals, this is an undeniable technical feat. Just the amount of things that the visual effects artists were able to put on screen is just staggering. What these guys did is that they practically made an entire animated film and built it around a bunch of, actors. And there's a lot of moving parts here. There's so much to look at, really. And the entire last hour especially, which is basically this gigantic fight scene in front of Erebor, is just a technical marvel. But before you get too fixated on the actual Battle of the Five Armies, don't forget that the opening sequence of this film with Smaug just destroying Lake Town is really, really good also. Like, it looks great, has great use of green screen. And one other thing I want to point out is that Azog the Defiler, he actually is able now to convey some sort of emotion, so he's finally kind of jumped the gap between just being a CGI thing and being a character. Like, I feel like Azog is now a character. The sound design in the movie and the score from Howard Shore is still great, but really the standout here, if you're talking about music, is Billy Boyd's song for this movie, The Last Goodbye, which I think is an absolutely incredible song. I don't know why it's not getting Oscar buzz right now, because I think it's the perfect way to end this. I think it's almost up there with Into the West. But what's so great about this song, aside from the fact that it's written really well, it's performed really, really beautifully by Billy Boyd, is the fact that it kind of serves as a bridge between like the indiness of the songs from The Hobbit to the grandness of the songs in Lord of the Rings. Now, I was expecting this movie to be like just as long as Return of the King because Peter Jackson likes his long movies, but the Hobbit movies have been getting progressively shorter and shorter. This is actually the shortest movie in the entire Middle-earth saga. It's only 2 hours 20 minutes long. As a result, it really gets straight to the point of what it wants to say, and there's not a lot of fat in it, which is great. When the little fat that's there, like, you don't really have to deal with it for that long. It just goes back into fighting. And a lot of people might think that the constant action is really, really exhausting, and I understand that. But me personally, I actually had no problem with all the fighting because I really just thought it really worked in the way that it let you feel what it was like to kind of be in this huge large-scale battle. It really is exhausting like that. I mean, for me, Helm's Deep, Pelennor Fields, you knew when those battles were going to end, but here, like, it's just this grind, really, and I actually really like that. However, amidst all the fighting, I was really surprised to see that Thorin's arc is really, really satisfying in this movie. I really thought that, his development just really, really came into its own in this movie, and I really loved it because here in this movie you realize that Thorin is not your typical hero. In fact, he's not really the opposite, but he's really just the epitome of dwarven stubbornness. And it's just amazing to see how that affects everybody else and how he tries to kind of redeem himself also. And I know I complained about not getting to know the other dwarves in the past two movies, but here I actually cared about their fate for some strange reason. Like, I felt for them, and I think that's because of just like the nature of the plot of this movie, because this movie it's clear that they don't need to develop character that much anymore. It's all fighting, and because it's all fighting, like, I really just kind of cared for the characters because I just spent 2 movies getting to know them. I kind of felt attached. But this movie really is called The Hobbit, and Bilbo is truly the heart of this story. He's just so innocent and simple amidst all this war, and every single moment he's on screen is just it really really tugs at the heartstrings. He's just such a great character. I think he's not in this movie a whole lot because it's all fighting and stuff, but whenever he's there, you're reminded of what this movie really is all about. And as such, Martin Freeman and Richard Armitage give like great performances. They reach emotional highs that are really up there with the best of them in the Middle Earth saga. And what's great about their emotional moments in this movie is that they really kind of play out these emotional moments through small gestures and very subtle acting. All the actors from Lord of the Rings, Ian McKellen, Hugo Weaving, Christopher Lee, Kate Blanchett, Orlando Bloom, and Ian Holm, they're all wonderful to see again. Who cares if they weren't in the book? Like, people keep complaining about, Legolas wasn't in The Hobbit. Who cares? As long as they're cool and they add something to the movie, and I really do think they add something to the movie, like, I don't mind. And I really think that Aidan Turner and Evangeline Lilly really should have had much more screen time in this movie because they're really good actors and they have a lot of range. It's just that they don't have a lot of time to show that range. And you really gotta give credit to Peter Jackson for, seeming to never run out of tricks when he directs action. Like, he really understands how to use each environment in his fight scenes, and he really has this sense of movement. All his action scenes aren't static; they keep moving from place to place, and he really understands how a battle needs to have a flow, like a dance, to really make it engaging. And I swear to God, the best fight scene in this movie is with Elrond and Saruman kicking butt at Dol Guldur. That stuff was mind blowing. I loved it so so much. Like, I almost teared up because it was just so good. Interestingly, despite all the chaos, I think Peter Jackson still manages to get his message across. And what I love about Peter Jackson's fights is that they always strive to mean something or to stand for something, even if like the message doesn't always get across. You can tell that Peter Jackson really wants his fight scenes to convey a message. But then we get to the problems about the movie, which are quite a few. Number one, I really do feel like there's a bit too much CGI sometimes. That's kind of an understatement, but I never really complained about CGI in the first 2 movies. I just kind of gave it a pass. But here, it really just gets way too cluttered sometimes, to the point that it feels like you're watching a video game. And I mean that in a bad way. I mean, video games are cool. It's just that sometimes it's just so soulless, the stuff you're watching on screen. Like, you just get sucked out of it because it's trying so hard to immerse you in this visual splendor that it actually takes you out of it. And as a result of this movie being only 2 hours 20 minutes long, it feels really really rushed. Also, the opening scene with Smaug, like, I feel like it concludes way too quickly, and the ending of the movie never actually wraps up satisfyingly. In fact, every other character except for Thorin and Bilbo don't really have satisfying arcs at all. It actually feels like Peter Jackson's trying to please all the naysayers who told him that his movies were too long, and he really chopped this movie down too short. And it's just not as fulfilling, I think, as a standalone experience as Desolation of Smaug, ironically enough. Because Desolation of Smaug, when that movie ended, you felt like a lot of stuff happened. You felt like, important things took place that would affect the next movie. But here, it really just kind of feels like a bunch of arcs really did not complete themselves. There's also way too many attempts at fan service. Like, characters will suddenly blurt out something that's related to Lord of the Rings. This happened like through the past 2 movies also. The romance between Tauriel and Kili is still completely underdeveloped. They introduced Dane in this movie, but he doesn't really go anywhere. And Bard also, unfortunately, doesn't really have a very satisfying arc. He just kind of disappears. And for some frustrating reason, Peter Jackson brought back the juvenile humor from the first movie. Like, I don't know what it's doing here, especially with Alfred and the Master from Lake Town. Like, I don't know why they get so much screen time. Even in the second movie, like, I don't even know why they were there in the first place. And a lot of the moments here also, through some of Peter Jackson's directorial choices, come off as very unintentionally funny. So in the end, I would say that The Hobbit, The Battle of the Five Armies is just an okay movie. However, I was still extremely entertained for what it was. And, when I went home, I listened to The Last Goodbye again, and I almost cried. So that says a lot. And you know what, no matter what you feel about these movies, for me, as long as they get more people into Tolkien and into Middle Earth and into the Lord of the Rings, I'm actually fine with that. So what did you guys think of The Hobbit, The Battle of the Five Armies? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Whatever you thought, whether you agreed with me or not, please leave me a comment. Let's have a conversation.